Hey Dad, why are you always working in the weekend at late at night?
No. When these kind of things happen, take control of the situation. Don't wish things were better, but wish you were better. And that's what we're doing in this series. Month end can be challenging and difficult, but your life doesn't have to be. In this series, we're going to go through various topics, tips and tricks aimed to help you, to empower you with more tips and tricks to improve your quality of life. So, a little bit about me and the series, a little bit of background. I've been around the data analytics field for close to 2 decades. Now, what's interesting is what I've noticed, the business problem back in 2006 are pretty similar to the problems I see today in 2023. So, hopefully this little series can help you improve your quality of life by giving you some little nuggets to set you on your path to improve your workflow and your quality of life. In this video, we're going to go through my top 3 formulas I think would help a finance professional. The first 2 is in Excel and the last one is in a functional database. So if you like the first 2, stay tuned for the third one because it might just blow your mind. Let's go. The first formula, it's going to be VLOOKUP. It's used by novices and seasoned professionals alike. If you haven't mastered this one, you will want to. So here I got a file that I've got all the operational expenses for me to do reporting and data analytics. But like most data analytics situations, this file isn't ready for me to ask meaningful questions yet. And why? As usual in the data dump from a source system, wherever it might be, usually it comes in a format that's friendly to a system, but not to the human being. And that's where VLOOKUP comes in. The ultimate reference formula that's been a family treasure for most finance professionals for a long time. This is a formula that can help you solve most of the reference problems. So either you're creating them yourself or you're reusing other people's VLOOKUPs in a big reporting pack. That's almost always there. If we look at accounts where I've got a mapping of a key and a description, I want to bring the description over here because then as a human, I understand what these account numbers do, so I can ask meaningful questions. Like, for example, if I want to distinguish between labor expenses or telephone expenses, I can't do that yet until I know what I'm looking at. So the first step would be to bring that reference out into my data set. And here comes the hero, VLOOKUP. What I would usually do is add a new column for it to be inserted. I go equals VLOOKUP. Select what I want to do as a lookup value. Find my lookup range, so it's going to be all of this. Select all of them. I hit F4 to lock them in as absolute references. We let the table know which column it's going to take, which for our case, we want to take the second column because the second column has got the description. Put a 2 there. And then last but not least, can it be a false match or an exact match? I personally like false match because I don't want it to look up some values. It has to be the exact number. So I put false. And voila. Now I've got all my account descriptions going down. All my 5,000 rows. Okay, so as good practice, of course, I'm going to name this account description. I'm going to quickly do this for the other columns as well. And repetition is the mother of skills. So if you don't know this formula well enough, let's see if you can catch what I'm doing now. Second time. So I'm going to do a VLOOKUP here. VLOOKUP. The first argument is always the cell that you want to look up. So I'm looking up 0. Second argument is where I'm looking up from. So I'm going to jump into my department lookup table. Here I can just hit F4 and mark these absolute references. So A2 to B9. And then the next argument will be what column I'm looking up this table. Second column and false. Expand this formula. F9. And my next favorite formula is the SUMIF. If your job requires you to analyze and manipulate data in meaningful ways, this is one of those bread and butter formulas that would really impact the quality of life. So let's check it out. Let's look at SUMIF formula that gives us context to the question that we want answered. In a typical scenario, we always have data that has more information than what we need specifically. SUMIF gives our query some additional context to the question that we want to ask. So for example, what's the amount that was spent on meals in 2021? We could go and highlight every row that has this meals keyword. Well, of course, you can just do it manually, like highlight here, and then add them up, but that's prone to error. We don't want to do that, and that's where we want to use a formula to automate all of them. Let's write them down so we can work on them one at a time. Maybe the first one is amount spent on telephone. Okay, that's a perfectly valid question, and that's probably not detailed enough. So let's ask the next level. Amount spent on telephone in 2022, but the first month. Now what's the next level? We go amount spent on telephone in 2022 January in England only. And last but not least, we can go one step further. We could go amount spent on telephone in 2022 first month in England for executives. Okay, let's answer some questions by using the SUMIF. Okay, so let's look at the SUMIF formula from the start. Go equals SUMIF and look at what's prompting us. So it's got 3 different arguments. It's kind of confusing, so let's go over them together. The first one is range. And the range means what's the range that we're going to apply the criteria to. So in this case, we are searching for the keyword telephone. So let's highlight the entire column with the account description, comma. Now it's asking us for the criteria. So let's type in the keyword telephone. And then last but not least, it's asking us for the set of data that we're trying to sum up. So it's going to be the value column. All right. So I hit Control Shift down there to select everything, and I hit OK. So immediately it's looking at the column K, searching for the keyword telephone, which is the middle argument, and it's going to sum everything in value in the column M where it matched that criteria. And it came to the answer 26,291. Brilliant. All right. Now the next thing is, what if we have multiple criterias? Because things are never as simple as one if statement. There's always more, right? So what if we're looking for telephone spent just for the first month? And this is where a similar formula, but a different one, comes into place. SUMIF S. All right, so what does that do? SUMIF F allows us to have multiple criteria. So let's look at this in a different way now. It's funny, yes, it's actually the other way around. The first argument is the range that we're trying to add up. So it's column M in this case. It's got our key data points. And then the first criteria is the same as before. We're looking for telephones in the column K. And once again, we're going to type in telephone. And then the second criteria is going to be period, where the period is 2022-01. And our answer comes down to 28,138. Great. So it's going to be much smaller than the whole year. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Now next let's have a look at it in more detail, because no one looks at numbers like that. It's always regional. Doesn't really make sense to add up the total European numbers. So let's have a look at England specifically for 2022 in the first month for the spending on telephone. It's going to be the same again. We're going to use SUMIF S because it's got multiple criteria. First, we mark the sum range. Criteria is going to be, so it's going to be that column, and we want it to be telephone. Next criteria is going to be 2021 again. So put in 2022 first month. Criteria number 3, we're going to put in the region description, and it's going to be matching specifically England. All right, let's see what we get. We've got 7,242, which is now a lot more meaningful than the first question we've asked. The total amount spent on telephone versus the total amount spent on telephone in England for the first month in 2022. Now, what if we want to go one step further and add the criteria of the executive department in here as well? All right, so we can just
retype the whole formula again, or this time we can go one step further and list out our criteria. Let's list out all of them. We're going to say version is budget. Period is going to be 222.01. A currency is local. Region, England. And then department, executive. And then next one, we've got account. And that's going to be telephone. Right? Easy. All right, so let's do the formula here. We're going to go SUMIF again, except this time we're going to use references instead of typing it all in directly. So let's go. First, we're going to go SUMIF S, yeah, because SUMIF only takes one argument. We've got multiples now. First one, we're going to sum the value set, and then first criteria is going to be the period. Great, and the period is going to be that period. Next, we are going to look at the region of England. So we highlight all the regions. And then instead of typing out England like we did last time, we're just going to reference the cell England. And then next, we're going to take in the department and then reference the department here, executive. Lastly, the account description. And instead of typing in telephone, we reference telephone. Okay, so now that we've specified all the formula and references, let's see what we've got. Now we've got exactly $1,404, which is a lot more meaningful in terms of what query we're trying to ask the data set, rather than just a high-level number of 262,901. Yeah. So SUMIF is my second most favorite formula for professionals. Because this would give us plenty of context to play around the data. Like, for example, if I want to change this from telephone spending now to meals, boom, here's my answer. I've got 1,283 on meals. What if we change the region to Poland instead? No problem. And here's our number. So this gives us relatively good flexibility in what we're trying to do, and the whole thing is very simple. One SUMIF S formula. Not SUMIF, because SUMIF only takes one. SUMIF S takes them all. But when you say SUMIF S, some people don't get it. So I'll stick with SUMIF.
Last but not least, my favorite formula of all time doing data analytical and reporting work is DBRW. This DBRW formula, if it is not as powerful as the previous two, it is even more powerful than SUMIF and VLOOKUP. If you don't know it already, you might be missing out. Check it out.
All right, so this is pretty powerful already. What is one even better? And in my opinion, that's the DBRW formula. A formula that is available if you've got a good functional database in the back end, like planning analytics. So DBRW is a formula that taps into your functional database. That's like a data source behind your Excel's front end. Essentially gives the power to the end user without much codings required. Is even easier than how to use the SUMIF S formula. So let's go. So here we have to tell the system what data set to look at. And in this case, this engine is backed by planning analytics. Planning analytics in the database. And the data set name is called the general ledger. I happen to have it laid out exactly the same as this data source file for simplicity purposes. So we're just going to use exactly what we've got here. We've got a budget, so I'm going to reference that. It's going to look at a budget. It's going to look at the period. It's going to look at a currency. It's going to look at the region. It's going to look at the product, which is column G. We're going to look at a department, which is column H, and then account, and that's this one. And the measure is account. So I'm going to type that in myself. Okay, and this gives us exactly the same value as that. Well, how did that work? All right, well, let's have a look. Welcome to the world of functional database. Here I've got a data set known as a cube called the general ledger. It's got all the previous dimensionalities we've looked at in our data set. We've got version, period, currency, region, product, department, account, and the measure, which is the amount. Here I've got the account going down the page, making up my standard P&L, net income, operating profit, and expenses. going down the page and with their own subgroups. Across the page, I've got my periods. At the moment, I'm looking at 2022. And of course, that can be expanded or collapsed as well. And then here on the top of the page, we've got the different dimensionality that we're looking at. So yes, we're looking at budget, local currency, total Europe, accounts by category, all the departments, and we're looking at the amount. Great. Now that we've got the basics out of the way, let's look at how functional database can improve our lives. So what we have here is all the interactivity can happen in my cube viewer. So we've got some minuses, basic lines, and ones of pluses. They're basically our line items at different levels. So by default, we can have consolidated travel expenses, or we can expand the travel expenses to drill down on the details. Likewise for every other single dimensionality we're looking at. So for example, we don't have to look at total Europe. We can go and look at just England. All right. And then we hit F9, our favorite key as Excel users, and we get our latest numbers. Now, what else is nice here? Of course, this allows us to slice and dice. So I can move months and I can switch it with different region. Hit F9, I get my new report. So here I can switch my period with my region. So for example, now I can do a slice in all my regions. I have total Europe here, which is made out of Western Europe and Eastern Europe. And in my Western Europe, I've got United Kingdom, France, and so forth. So this is fully interactive. That's the first good part. And I can redo that. Now this is also fully customizable. So for example, I can have what we call a stacked dimension. So within total Europe, can I do a breakdown over my gross sales? No problem. So I'm going to keep the gross sales and then gross sales for total Europe for all my months going across the page. Easy peasy. Now, what else is nice here if I now reset my P&L view? Now, of course, now that I can slice and dice it, I can also export all of this goodness into Excel where the bulk of my analytic can happen. So I can export into Excel, hit OK. So this is a pre-formatted report that we extract straight from the cube viewer or the functional database that we were just looking at before. This is still fully interactive. So for example, I can expand by double-clicking any lines that's consolidated. So I can double-click on the labor expenses. And then it's going to break down the labor expenses in detail for me. Now, the slices that we were looking at before is still interactive. So instead of looking at total Europe, we can switch this to look at Poland, for example. Hit F9, and our number's updated. So now, how does this work? Is there black magic involved, or is this just good functionality? And the answer is, of course, it's just good functionality and a bit of magic. So if I click into a cell and I look at the formulas here, basically everything is in these colorful boxes where there's no hidden detail. Every number is traceable, great forwarded, great for an end user who's trying to figure out what the numbers are doing and how they're adding up. So in this case, I'm looking at 2022 in January, total cost of sales, looking at budget, local currency, looking at Poland, total category, etc. Now, if I look at the next cell, let's say if I look at labor expenses, we can expect exactly the same because it's just looking down the page, right? We're looking at labor expenses instead of total cost of sales. Now, how is this useful? Well, in many ways. The first one is when I change my dimensionality, let's say I change from Poland to England, I hit F9, I immediately get the latest numbers for England, right? And nothing's hidden. There's no multiple hidden Excel spreadsheets and hoping everything is linked up correctly. Functional database just do all of that work for you, and you can focus on the presentation and the analytics. Okay, so that's one. Another one is every cell is basically looking at a part in your data set, and it's no hidden detail, which means as you get more used to it, you can really navigate through your data a lot quicker. Now, in this case, I might not want to look at 2022. I want to look at 2021 and do my LY comparison, which is last year. So here I can do 2021, and here I can do 2021-01. I copy those formulas across, hit down, F9, Boom. And that's my reporting. Really quick. Yeah. And of course, you being an Excel whiz, you might want to do something like this. I insert a new column. In fact, I'm going to insert 3 because it's just make it nicer. I'm going to have 2 of these columns just as a spacing. And then I'm going to have versus LY. Yep. Great. And then I can do a quick report where 2022 minus 2021. That's my difference. Take it down the page, hit F9, our favorite key, and then it gives us our differences. And of course, you're going to add everything you can do in Excel to it. You can do versus LY, you can do percentage, and other more advanced formulas as well. Okay, great. So now we've talked about how they're dynamic, interactive. Now, what is logical, but not fully obvious, is because this is fully interactive, which means the system is taking care of the painful parts for you, the account and how things roll up, the system looks after that for you. Now, what's the benefit here? So, in the case now, in traveling expenses, now that COVID's over in 2023, we might have new travel lines that didn't exist in the previous environment when we first set up the account system. Now, what can happen here is, as the source system creates a new account code, as the end user, when I look at travel expenses, I don't need to worry about anything, because when there's a new account that comes through in the source system, as soon as the end users hit F9 in the functional database, I don't have to go into multiple Excel reports to make sure that the new account is now summing up into my traveling expenses. Everything is done for me in the back end. All right. Now, the detail of that is for another video. But let's jump back to one last cool thing I would like to show you about the functional database. So what is Excel really good for? Of course, reporting. We quickly just did 2022 versus 2021 comparison for England. Now, what else is great? Is for capturing budget, for capturing data input. As an Excel user, have you ever been in a situation where someone says to you, okay, I like these numbers, but I need a certain number to be increased by a percentage or total value? So in this case, I like the 2022 retail number, but I would like to increase that by 10% and see what that looks like. Okay, well, if you're in the normal Excel world, good luck. It's not terribly difficult, but there's a lot of work, because the retail number, for this case, is made up of all the product categories and all the departments, which is complicated. There are lots of numbers to add up to make sure that things still true. Now, in the world of functional database, this is very easy. If I now need to increase my retail numbers by 10%, I can use the functional database to do the hard work for me. I can go data spread, where I can now set a percentage change, and I increase that by 10%. System's going to take a moment to work it out, and then now, within a second, specifically 0.03 seconds, it's gone into every single data point, or in the Excel world, gone to every single cell that's made of the retail number for everything we're looking at for 2022. Well, just to illustrate how complicated it could be, the total 2022 number, first up, is made up of all the months within 2022. Now, typically, you have to really worry about how you maintain the seasonality of that information in Excel. In this case, this functional database has proportionally spread for us without making life complicated for us. Great. Now, what else is it doing is it's also gone to every single location in my data set and proportionally spread that data. Great. And of course, by all products and all departments and categories as well, right? So this is an example of what the system can really enhance the user experience for an Excel user without making life complicated. Hello, functional database, and good luck, Excel. Now, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you have to pick a planning solution, maybe now think twice before randomly picking what looks best or what people say. find yourself a functional database because they can really improve the quality of life as opposed to other SQL or transactional based technology, which can also do the job, but it's going to be much harder and there's going to be a lot more processes involved than what we've just shown you here today.
Until we can fully trust AI to do our budgeting forecasting, well, I'm going to be continue to putting out content for you. If you found any of this content interesting or useful for yourself or your friends, please make sure to give us that like and share the links, give us a comment, and I'll be sure to check them personally. Of course, I fully appreciate your time for watching this video. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next video.